Bo's here.
Okay, so I just want to let everyone know that we're streaming and recording. And do we start with Tanner? Or do we start with Chris introducing Tanner again?
Well, we just kind of close that. Well, yeah, if you guys recall, I'll just jump in since I said I'm not going to talk much and I won't. It's not my meeting. I want you guys to interact and do what we're going to do. But I will kind of reintroduce, if last time you remember, we appointed Tanner Woody as our chair. So Tanner is going to, Councilor Groner's coming in. Tanner's going to lead us through. Do you need a paper copy of this?
I could take one.
Here, fine, I'll grab another.
You're in charge.
Yeah, I think we printed it up for everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Do we need to, what's the word, approve?
We do have the minutes from meeting one. Yeah, but Lynn's probably right. We should probably do a quick roll call of who's here first.
Okay.
I think.
Yes, well, I will start the Vision 43 working group meeting too. And let's start with the roll call. Tanner Woody, Chair of Vision 43 working group.
Carol Bright, City Council.
Rob Henderson, member at large. David D. Jones, Planning Commission. Leo Groner, City Council.
Can I make a question real quick though? Are you here as a citizen or as a liaison?
Citizen.
Okay, I wasn't sure because I think
And the list.
I just want to make a distinction. Thank you.
Still invited?
Absolutely.
With the role, that's and the expectations. Thank you.
Spencer Crandall, member at large.
Mary Carlson, member at large.
And then we have Bo.
Hi, I'm Bo. I'm just a nosy citizen.
Okay. Then we have Brandon.
Friends, MIG.
MIG. Okay. And
Russell?
Hello,
So Russell?
I'm just a citizen.
are you a citizen of Westland or are you? Okay.
Yeah, citizen of Westland. I also have a commercial property right on the Highway 43.
Fantastic. Yes. I asked because I knew you were a business owner. I didn't know if you were a citizen as well. So thank you.
Yeah, Russell is also a member of our Economic Development Committee here in Westland. Has been for quite a few years actually. So has some interest from the economic side. Thanks for joining us, Russell. Appreciate it.
So with the roll call done, are we okay approving this from last time? I don't think we all have. We don't have this.
They were sent out.
Yeah, I don't think they're in this packet.
Get them in this packet, I apologize.
And if you guys want more time, we can just come around to meeting free and do it. It's not gonna stop us if we want another look.
Okay.
It's totally up to you guys.
Can we do that? Because I wasn't sort of my bandwidth. I wasn't thinking, oh, we're gonna approve minutes, so I
Yeah.
gotta make sure.
not a problem, not a problem at all. So I'm just gonna make note.
That's
that we'll-
homework.
that
So we
meeting-
tabled them.
We're gonna table them. Meeting 3, we will have both meeting 1 and meeting 2 minutes to approve. And we'll make sure to print some copies as well, so people can refresh their memories when they get in. So I will make note of that.
Oh, but it is on here though. Sorry, I jumped to item 2. I missed that. So that one's good. Agenda overview and project status update. So that's what we're looking at right now, the agenda. Do we have public comments at all
No,
for this? Okay.
we don't have anyone here.
Unless Bo or
Russell have-
Leo or Russell wanted to make comments, but
No comment.
fair enough.
All right, thank you guys. Well, I would,
So agenda number 1 is Matt. He has stuff to say.
okay. Overview, okay, fantastic. So let's go with the project status update with Matt.
All right, yeah, so Brandon and I are gonna share a PowerPoint with y'all, which I think, Brandon, are you gonna, yes, Brandon's gonna do that. And then he and I are gonna kind of tag team some of the information in the PowerPoint for different agenda items. And I'm gonna start off, I'll wait till it's up and people can see it. There we go, perfect. All right, awesome. Yeah, so this includes the agenda and the things we want to talk to y'all about today. So give you an update on the process. Probably, unless there's questions about that, we'll kind of roll into items 2 and 3, if that works for everybody, which is mostly going to be us just kind of giving you a summary of what we heard from survey number 1 and kind of what we heard, some of the highlights of what we heard at the open house and neighborhood meetings, and how many people attended and things like that. Those will mostly be, I would say, informational items, but we're happy to just kind of take comments and questions and things like that. And then I'll say the other items are going to be more interactive, where we're going to present some information, but we're really looking for some comments and feedback from y'all on those things. So I will just note that about the agenda. So next slide there. So in terms of kind of the project status and overview, so Chris and Lynn have been out conducting outreach activities at various community events. They can kind of tell you more about that if you'd like to know more. And then we've had several project meetings since we last met. We had a meeting that was kind of focused on people who rent their housing in the corridor and in the city. That was in late May. Pretty soon, a couple weeks after that, we had a community-wide open house. The renters meeting was at the library. The community-wide open house was at the Robinwood Community Center. And then we had another meeting that was sort of advertised specifically for Robinwood residents, also at the Robinwood Community Center, and then a listening session in Bolton. And we've got some more information on that kind of later in the presentation here. We also did a joint study area tour, bus tour with the City Council and the Planning Commission back in early June. And we kind of stopped at several locations along the corridor, and then also visited, man, I'm always forgetting the name of those blocks in Lake Oswego. Chris will tell me, as sort of an example of the kinds of opportunities that there might be along the corridor in West Lynn, and got some information from Lake Oswego's economic development director, and I think the mayor was there too. Anyway, really informative tour with Planning Commission and City Council. I think a lot of excitement over this project by them. And so since conducting all those meetings, we've finished a first draft of a project vision and goals, and that's one of the things we're going to talk to you all about during this meeting. Get your feedback on all of that. Also, We've been conducting an initial online survey for this project, so we closed that survey within the last few weeks. There's a second survey that we'll be conducting as well, but we'll talk to you about what we heard from the first survey today. And then in terms of next steps, one, we'll be refining the project vision and goals based on what we hear from you, as well as what we hear via the project or via the online survey, because we've got some questions for folks about kind of relative agreement or support for the draft vision and goals. And then we're going to be preparing draft corridor concepts and visualizations or illustrations, renderings, particularly of a couple of the areas we're focused on in the corridor. And we'll talk more about that later in the meeting. But that's a fairly significant task that's coming up. So that'll be the subject of our next meeting when we get to that point. So that's just kind of where we are in terms of the project, what we've been doing, and kind of a couple of things that are coming up in the project. So anybody have any questions for us on any of that?
Matt, I have one addition to add, and it's just an expansion. When we did our city council and planning commission tour of our stops here in West Lynn, and then we went over into Lake Oswego, I always call them the wiser blocks. I don't know if that's right, but that's how I reference them. It's the new development on Highway 43 in Lake Oswego.
Wiser's grocery store.
Wiser grocery store used to be, Millennium Park is there now. When we did that tour, one of the things we had Sid, who is the long-range development manager for the city of Lake Oswego, gave us a tour. He's also a West Lynn resident, by the way. But one of the things I think is important to just highlight really quick is he talked a lot about how the vision for those blocks, for the wiser blocks, really began in about 1986. And that's when they came up with their first visioning document for the way that it has been developed now. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as we're talking about doing some visioning work on Highway 43 that we want to last in decades, and it will take decades, but that's the value of what we're doing now. We may not get to go see a construction project next year because of our work today, but we will over time see some of these developments come through.
And
yeah, Carol.
Going back to that, my family had a family reunion and we stayed at the Lakeshore Hotel and Millennium Park Plaza and that whole development where the city home and all those stores are, had just been leveled.
Yeah.
So, and that was in 2000.
Yeah, not that long.
Yeah. So I started in 86, even,
Yeah.
14 years later, that was just bare dirt.
Yeah.
So that's, it takes time.
Yeah.
When we were doing that tour, one of the smartest questions was asked by Lynn. And she asked what he saw as the top priorities of West Lynn going. If you remember his answers.
On the spot.
I wrote it down,
Okay.
but it was your question, therefore you should have priority. Answer it.
Well, go ahead and share with me.
From what I wrote down in my notes, from his answer to Lynn's, what I always consider the smartest question in the room, and that's what I'm always looking for. His answers were intent, long-term planning, and funding is his top three, and having a very clear intent, maintaining that. Kind of like the way that movies are produced, you have to have vision and keep vision throughout the process.
How do you do that unless you're on this committee for 30 years?
I'm sorry, I don't see another problem with that. So lifelong public servant, comma, lifelong public servant, comma, life.
So I will say that one thing Sid, the manager and like Oswego pointed out, and then I'll kick it back to you, Matt, sorry, is he talked about it's frequent that he pulls the original vision document out and just sort of refreshes himself and even council at times on, are we staying true to the vision of what we decided back in 1986?
Like
So-
the US Constitution.
Yeah, you kind of have to use it as your foundation,
And
right?
but
So,
he wasn't always in that role at the
Correct.
city. I mean, when I worked. at the
You worked
city,
there, yeah.
He was, he was a planner, but not in the role that he is now. So somebody else kind of put that together, and yet he's still using that as the roadmap.
that's right.
Well, so it does seem like something you would like infuse into like the council and the mayor's office of like, the person comes in, this is one of the things they do. And it would be written into the charter.
And I think, from my perspective, my background is finance, also start kind of getting little fingers of this into the budget process.
Yep.
Because if you don't, and that goes to the funding piece, if you don't do that, if you don't put little bits of it in the budget, it's not gonna happen.
That's right. All right, Tanner, apologies for jumping in there.
No, it's great. Thank you.
Still going.
You guys say Matt's still going, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, just I guess any other questions on just where we are in the process, and then whenever we're ready, we can move to the next item on the agenda. But that's it for me for the project status update, kind of recapping where we are now.
Okay. I guess my question is like, does this continue or you guys have gotten all the feedback that you need?
It does continue. Oh, sorry, Matt, go ahead.
I mean, we are still, I would call us still early in this process. Plenty of work left to do. And for right now, all I'm doing is kind of giving you a sense of, here's what we've been doing, and we're going to say more on the next couple of agenda items about what we've been hearing from folks via the survey and via the open house and neighborhood meetings. And then we're going to talk about this draft vision and goals, which came, really directly from what we've been hearing at the meetings and via the survey. So we'll talk about that. But that's, one of the kind of early pieces of this project. And we're going to want to hear from you about that when we get to that point on the agenda. But yeah, we've still got a lot of work left ahead of us here.
Well, that is the next item on the agenda, so I think it would be a great segue to get into the survey.
Okay, awesome. So I'll cover this one too. And also when we get to the next item, and then Brandon will kind of take over from there. So survey number 1 results, great set of responses from my perspective. We got over 600 responses to the survey. I'm not going to go into like a ton of detail about what we heard, but we'll just present, a couple of slides here and give you the highlights. So I think one, really a lot of desire for improvements to make it easier to walk and move along the corridor as a pedestrian. So strong desires for walking path improvements, as well as improvements for people driving within the corridor, and improvements to address safety issues. Those were some of the kind of highest ranked things, but with sidewalks and pathways sort of at the top of the list, and sort of vehicular improvements, let's say, and safety improvements kind of next. But also, though, people wanting to see improvements to landscaping, improvements for bike facilities, and the other things that we asked about there. Also, we gave people the option. We asked sort of a multiple choice question, but then we also gave people the opportunity to kind of write in responses about specific needs. Some of the things we heard about in those responses were installing more crosswalks to help people get across the highway. Desire, I think, among some people, slow speeds. So again, kind of related to safety improvements, improve lighting along the corridor, and improve signals or intersections. Again, just kind of to manage movement for everybody along the corridor. And again, particularly for folks walking along the corridor. So that was part of what we heard. Next slide. Brandon, you want to advance to the next one? Maybe you have. I'm just still seeing the survey number of the first. Oh, there we go. Nope, sorry. There we go. Awesome. So we also asked people about types of activities they want to see more of, and types of kind of uses or just things they want access to. The things that kind of came out on top here were places to shop and eat and recreate. So that was kind of top of the list for folks, but kind of right next to it, I guess they're tied here, was green spaces like parks and trails. So those were the things that people were sort of most interested in seeing more of along the corridor, more places to eat, shop, recreate, and places where they have access to trails or green spaces. Some of the other things that kind of came up pretty strong, kind of next level down, I guess, would be places for community events and gatherings. So relates a little bit to parks and trails, but just places where people can get together and hang out and kind of see other folks in the community there. And then mixed use development. So mixed use development, some, mix of both retail or shopping and housing. So kind of a mix of that. That was fairly strongly supported as well. So those were the things that kind of rose to the top. Again, a lot of written responses about improving walking and accessibility along the corridor as well. And again, with that many responses, we had a lot of different comments. So we're not going to go into all those, but if you want to look at kind of the whole list of comments, we can provide those. And you've gotten, I think, a more detailed summary of the results. But I'll stop there and just see if you all have any questions about what we heard or any just kind of comments on what I've just described in terms of the highlights.
Leo has a question.
Yeah, were these volunteer survey takers, or was there a selection?
This was an open survey. This wasn't, and so that's a really good question and sort of good point. This is not a call it statistically valid survey. This was not a random sample survey. We did ask people some questions about demographics to get a sense of, kind of how the demographics of the survey stacked up against the demographics of the community, which is always helpful. But this was, anyone could participate in the survey, and the city made the survey available via their website. And we used all the events that we talked about earlier and the other events and activities that Chris and Lynn have been going to as ways to promote participation in the survey, as well as the city's website and other means. So we've really tried to kind of spread the word about the survey as much as possible. And we kept it open for a fairly extended period of time just to try to hear from as many people as we could. But yeah, it was open to anybody that wanted to participate. We didn't go out and select, the folks to participate in the survey. And again, you will kind of hear, maybe some of you have even participated in what are called random sample or statistically valid surveys. This was not one of those. Those require, frankly, a lot more kind of choreography and expense, frankly, than what we did here. But it was very widely sort of distributed, I would say, this survey. And again, I think, pretty strong number of responses from folks in West Lynn.
Go ahead.
Question. This is the same survey that you had started earlier in the year, and then you've added more answers, correct? More responses is what I meant to it.
We had, I think, a very early kind of initial survey, and then this one was it wasn't a huge number of different things, but yeah, we added some additional questions.
The question I have in my mind is, what's the difference between more housing options and mixed use? Because mixed use often has housing in it. So
yeah,
why are those helpful?
So when we asked people about housing specifically, so housing is kind of a standalone use or a standalone type of development. And then we also asked in the same question about mixed use development, which is a combination of housing and essentially businesses typically. So we wanted to get a sense of, what did people think about either of those options, housing in tandem with other types of uses and housing as a standalone use. So, if you wanted to think about like adding, I wouldn't add those up, but I would say, given the responses related to both mixed use and housing, there is definitely a support for housing in the corridor as well.
Yeah, and I guess it fits the shopping, eating, and recreation kind of fits in there too. So, okay.
Yeah, that is true.
So Matt, I just want to acknowledge Molly Maycomb is here, and she she has a business loan corridor.
Actually, I think right across from Russell, if I'm not mistaken, across the highway. Yeah, near Tanner's.
Yes.
Wow, you got that whole intersection
We're a
is
little
very well
triangle.
represented right now.
That's right.
I think Commissioner.
Awesome.
Oh, just a really, really quick one. You had mentioned earlier and offered, if there is chance we could get a significant sampling or good portion of some of the written answers that the people gave both in the online and the open houses, because that's where kind of creativity and inspiration kind of gets born from, is hearing their
Okay, so
thoughts.
you did get that in your package.
Yeah.
Okay, you just have to open up and read it.
Yeah.
This is what I handed out to you today.
I got that, well, I got the totals. I didn't get the,
There's 83 pages.
Yeah, it's 83 pages.
Or
so-
84.
good Lord, I didn't get to that. Okay.
And it's also
Yeah.
Too much, yeah.
on the webpage, on the
Okay,
project
it
page,
is, yeah.
so, yeah.
But
So
you're
that
right.
information's available.
I've spent some time reading through those as well as reading comments on the map from the pins, and it is very enlightening to kind of see some patterns, but also just get a feel for what people are thinking. That's not maybe what I was thinking. So yeah, I'm glad to see you want to read some of those.
Thank you. Apparently my printer just noped out on that
No,
one.
that's
So
not cool.
thank you.
That is-
Yeah, and I'm sorry I'd forgotten that you did get the full set of comments. Yeah, which is, it's sort of like when you provide the written comments, it's all or nothing. We don't usually like sort of pull out a sample. It's like you get them all or none of them. And it was a lot of them. So yeah, hence the 83 pages.
I felt like we've been clear from the very beginning that this is not about paving the road.
Yeah,
And I was really frankly astounded at the number of comments about fix the road, pave the road, fix the potholes.
So I
Huge
think that's,
number. Even though we've been pushing out that message, this is not about fixing the highway because
Right.
we're not ODOT.
yeah.
I think everyone hears that time and time again, but my experience with the last 4 years of participating has been, even, I feel like, first meeting we had here, and that's why I hope we can get to the visions and goals later. But the first meeting, we had that ourselves, where it's like, what's, like, we need to fix 43, 43 is the problem. And that's actually, what I wanted to bring up the bridges, because I haven't even thought of that, but the bridges come up, there's 44 instances that bridges are mentioned in the document. Some speaking about the Arch Bridge and the OC Bridge, but specifically pedestrian bridges, which I think is very interesting. For the what is it called here? Mixed use. So we brought that up in the EDC before. And I just want to make sure that there's a clarification here that mixed use development that might have meant shared workspace. And I don't know if that is the case. So Matt, I don't know if you are familiar with that, like basically light industrial zoning is kind of the idea there. So that people have a place to do like steel work or, I don't know, craftsmanship.
Yes.
Woodworking.
Exactly, woodworking stuff. So there's like a place for the tools. I don't know if the mixed use development is incorporating that as well or represents that.
And I think it potentially could. Again, when I think of mixed use, I think of a mix of housing and kind of non-residential, usually commercial. It could be maybe light industrial. It does not typically include heavier industrial facilities. If it does include sort of, I'm trying to think of like kind of worker spaces, then it's usually at sort of a modest scale, I would say. So I will also note that when we get further along, ultimately, one of the goals of this process is to draft. So the city right now doesn't really have a mixed use zone within their development code or their zoning ordinance. And so one of our intended outcomes of the project is to draft a zone like that. And once we get to that point, that's part of the discussion we'll want to have. Like when we're drafting the zone that goes into the development code, what are the specific types of things that are allowed? in addition to housing, in addition to shops, restaurants, et cetera. So I think I wouldn't sort of say yes or no, that's for sure allowed or not allowed, or would or wouldn't be allowed. But I think it's a discussion we'll want to have as we move forward.
So Matt, we did talk early on in the process about like breweries and those kinds of things that are traditionally kind of thought of as a light industrial type thing, like, destination breweries and things like that.
Yeah. So again, that we will ultimately we'll get more specific about this topic. I'm just saying I wouldn't rule those things out. And I don't know if we've made a decision that they're all absolutely going to be in there. So
we'll define it at a later time, but
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a mixed bag at this point.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification.
Yeah, my big concern about this is, I mean, with the backbone of our project being Highway 43, do we understand what ODOT's intentions are with 43? And what do we have that plan, or are they gonna try and incorporate our stuff, or are we supposed to try and incorporate their stuff?
So we have a concept plan for Highway 43 in West Lynn that was approved through council in 2016. Unfortunately, there isn't any money to actually do any of that plan. To implement that concept plan, we were part of the Metro Transportation Bond in 2020 that failed. So we weren't able to get funding to do anything. ODOT is now going to be overhauling the intersection of Merrillhurst and Highway 43. That's the $7 million they were going to pitch in to that larger concept plan. So they've just picked out the first one out of Lake Oswego, basically the first intersection. Having said that, it's the first primary with a stoplight coming out of Lake Oswego.
Yeah, sorry.
It is not the first intersection, but it's the first four-way
Right,
intersection with a current stoplight that needs turn lanes and crosswalks and all that kind of stuff. So sort of the first quote major one. But you're right, it's not the first one. My apologies. Having said that, we did have the opportunity last week. I was able to meet and brief Oregon State Senate President Senator Rob Wagner, who obviously has some sway. And so there's some ongoing conversations on the sort of that political side about possible jurisdictional transfer of ownership of the highway. Maybe ODOT opening up their mind to, hey, it might be more cost effective to invest in some of this, give us some money and the highway, and then you can walk away from it. So it's sort of not a third rail. I worked for Metro for a long time, and we call them orphan highways because they just sort of walked away from them and left them to someone else to deal with. They're all over the place. 82nd Avenue. McLaughlin. You can go around and around.
Yeah.
I love the interstates and not big on the highways
Right.
anymore. So we've got Mayor Bielostowski and others are working on having these conversations. And you're right, it's sort of the spine. It is that backbone of what we're talking about. We've had someone at a meeting recently tell me that I'm putting the cart before the horse and that you should fix the highway first and then do all this stuff. And I actually think, number one, if we wait, it might be 100 years. And someone's got to start somewhere, and we can't wait for ODOT. We can control what we can control. So.
Yeah, and I understand that but still, it's, with the plans that we did in 16 where, they've gone completely, not.
We still have them. And they're still valid.
They're fairly dormant.
Yeah, dormant, yes. We still have them, and hopefully we'll be able to chip away at those.
Yeah.
And Len was saying, once we do this plan, then we can revisit that and update the 2016 plan to make sure that there's no incongruities, and that we're going in the same direction.
Yeah, much like Matt is mentioning, we're gonna, part of their lift in this project is to write that new mixed use code. Also part of it is, as we hear more of what the community wants in and around Highway 43, we might have to make adjustments to that 16 plan to accommodate that. So there's a lot of moving parts going along, but I think, as we've been saying all along, the first things first is we need the community's vision. What do we want? And that's going back to kind of a question Spencer had. We're about halfway through the engagement part of this project. So I think I've done 23 events right now, and I guarantee count to 30. I think we'll reach 40, which is great. exhausting, but great. So anyway, I said I wasn't going to talk a lot. I just wanted to make some clarification. And David D, it looks like you have Commissioner Johnson, my apologies.
Also, always feel free to reach out to us, ask, happy to help with those things as well. Then also in the last meeting, you talked about that Portland Metro had just stated that Highway 43 is a high priority, but context of what that statement meant, it was kind of at this meeting, maybe to receive some more information or clarity as to what that statement meant.
Yeah, the only real clarification I have now is they're very happy that we're going to create some sort of planned document to show what we would like. That's typically how they work is it's really hard to go get grant funding or any support when you just say we want it to be better. We need specifics. And so they're very excited we're doing that. And then they've said, well, look, it's something that we would, and again, this is from one of the 7 electeds for Metro, that we would like to help invest in that corridor, and we find there's a lot of need for it. So they're aggressive, and that's a pretty aggressive statement for an agency to make, but there's no commitment or specifics at this time.
So they're enthusiastic, but they're enthusiastic to see a well-constructed proposal.
That's correct. And look, if we came in and said, we are going to build a double-decker highway and we're going to build a tunnel just so we can get more cars through, Metro would walk away. Have fun. We're out. So obviously it's slightly dependent on what we create, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that, what the community's vision creates. But I think we can see in some of these early results, we're heading in a direction that I think that will get a lot of regional support.
Well, I also want to reiterate that, like in terms of ODOT, while ODOT owns it, they're not taking any leadership. The city has to take the leadership. In our city and regionally, so it becomes what we want and not just, languishing. Because if we don't take leadership, it's just going to languish. And in 50 years, it'll be the same thing.
That's right.
So we don't need ODOT to, say you're doing great, because we tell them this is what we want.
This is what we want. That's right.
And I still think there's a better chance of ODOT jumping in and participating once we do our thing and have our vision.
100%. And one of the things Matt and Brandon and Lynn and I will discuss tomorrow in our regular meeting is putting together our technical advisory group, which does include ODOT. So it's the technical experts from around the region that have things to do with it. So that, those conversations are going to happen as we have these similar meetings with our technical folks, that you can't help that the discussion is going to happen, right? I mean, the highway's going to come up. It's the elephant in the room. And so we can at least start maybe laying some groundwork for discussions with ODOT and Region 1 here in the Portland area.
And so,
Can I maybe just jump in and do a really quick time check? This is a great discussion. I don't want to squash the discussion, but I do want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about the vision and goals. So, at some point, I want us to move along to the next item.
I want to make a clarification while we're on the topic, however, about the responses, about the bridges and the tunnels. So has that been discussed before? Who owns the land? I mean, I guess that itself is a rhetorical question, but who owns the land underneath the highway? If you own the land, you own the land. So that would be ODOT.
Yeah.
Who owns the airspace though above the highway? I mean, what kind of litigations would be? I guess that would be zoning, though, so it'd be just cut off and it's just still theirs. So for the bridges and the tunnels, has anything like that been done within the space of 43 or any of the other highways in Oregon that we can think of or aware of?
No, I know that Lake Oswego has shown no interest.
That is a good example.
Lake Oswego has shown no interest in a bridge from Gladstone over to Lake Oswego. That's been a non-starter for 10 or 15 years.
So not those bridges. Wait, Gladstone? Oh, sorry. Wait.
You're talking about like.
So physically they could happen, but you're probably talking about one bridge would be the same amount of money as our 20-year transportation budget here in Westland. Probably in the $40 to $50 million range by the time you get it all set up. Yeah. Our 20-year transportation budget is $45 million. So it becomes a mathematical equation of like, we flat out can't afford what would ODOT be willing to do? I don't know.
How
So,
much for a sip?
yeah, right. So what I would simply say is just that there will be a lot of cool ideas, but, you know, first and foremost,
Feasible.
not all gonna be feasible. That's right.
Yeah, and that's a little early for that kind of discussion.
Yeah.
These are just ideas getting laid down, and then, you know, I think as Matt talks about the plan here, he can show us the path forward with, you know, integrating some of those proposals.
Yeah, okay, definitely. I was just intrigued because I've never seen anything like that in Oregon or considered that even as an option. Yeah, Leo, please.
Before we leave this slide, I just have one question. I'm noticing that green space ties for number 1. Since there are 2 or 3 parks within the corridor, I'm wondering if voting for green space is essentially opposition to brick and mortar development. Should we interpret it that way?
I didn't get a sense of that when I was reading it. I just felt like people felt that it was the highway itself was too much cement, and they wanted to see some softer spaces and, you know, like, even if it's just a planting strip that provides some soft spaces and little areas to sit and you know, enjoy some open space, you know, some green space. But I didn't see that as opposition. I just said, I read that as making a softer highway.
Matt,
When you could extrapolate what Lake Oswego did, it could just say better flow. Commercial and gathering green spaces.
Well, and I think there's some green spaces, like the city-owned property there next to the Robinwood Center. It's inaccessible. It's green space, it's not developed, but you can't access it or get to it. There's berries and all kinds of stuff. And we talked on the tour about
Opening it
that
up.
could be a nice space that's right there next to the highway.
so it looks like Molly has her hand up, so I'd like to give her a shot at jumping in here.
Thank you. I don't even know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yep, you're
Okay.
good.
I'm having difficulty with computer today, but I felt like as I was going through, I don't think people really truly understood that we're really talking about just Highway 43, if that's what we're doing. I understand that people want more green space, and we can get that for people like traveling like to the market or whatever, where we can put in pathways so they could not go on the highway, but maybe through like different neighborhoods to get there. But I was reading about how other areas around the world are taking the problem with traffic into consideration and dealing with it. And they found that really just beautifying the location, like putting in the medians in the roads, like Lake Oswego did, tends to slow traffic down, and people get less frustrated because they're not staring at cars all the time. There are other things that they can have their attention focused on, I guess.
That's a
So
great,
just-
point, Molly.
Yeah, and just a thought. I mean, that I didn't read. I should have read the funding, but I guess I mean, and you've probably checked this out already, but federal funding for different solar projects, possibly things like that, might be available to us. I don't know. Has anybody checked into that?
Well, I think what I'll say about funding is we are going to do a tax increment financing feasibility study in early 2025.
Okay.
And on top of that, there are federal and regional and state grants for various parts of this project. But again, the first things first is we have to have a community and council approved project. And then we can go and work with, you know, our friends like Councilor Lewis from Metro and whomever, our new friend, Senator Wagner out of Lake Oswego. So it's these things where we have to hone in on what we're going to do first, and then we can start to step out and look for help funding help in various manners. Matt, I saw you also were kind of putting your hand up there, so I didn't want to cut you off.
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
Also, I wanted to mention, I don't know if anybody else saw this, but they have these new solar strips for sidewalks that like, for example, I noticed that people are asking for a crosswalk or something to get across at Pimlico and at Mark Lane to get across to 43. And one of the things I noticed was that they have these crosswalks that that can feel or somehow identify people are coming. And what it does is it makes a flashing light, and then these actual strips light up. So when cars are coming, they see that somebody's at the crosswalk. And I thought those were very interesting. I don't know if anybody's using them at this time here locally, but in Europe, I noticed they're using them there.
I was just telling you that for someone who tries to cross Willamette, Highway 43 with 2 dives, if there's a crosswalk and they're still driving 45 miles an hour, that crosswalk is not going to keep me safe, lit or not. And
Yeah.
I'm concerned that without an actual 4-way stop or a 2-way stoplight, that we're going to be looking at more pedestrian deaths, not fewer.
Yeah, and that is actually one of the things that
We're gonna have to move on for the agenda, unfortunately. So I just want to give Matt one quick opportunity, see if he wanted to say anything. And then I think we really need to get into the open house and meeting recaps.
Yeah,
So
I don't have.
Information might have come up within that. So Matt, do you have anything that you'd like to share?
I don't have anything to add at this point. So I think a lot of great ideas here, and some of the things that y'all have mentioned, we will talk about a little bit more once we get into the corridor concept examples and approach item on the agenda. So yeah, nothing more for me at this time because I do want to let us kind of keep moving through. I think somebody on the call has got some music.
You got that. Thank you.
Okay.
Like
Awesome.
Open
All right.
houses, please. Thank you.
Yep. So I'll cover this pretty quickly and then just see if people have questions about it. So again, we had 4 of these events. Kind of total up the numbers, about 140 attendees combined at these events. So the renters meeting at the library, the 2 events in Robinwood, and the event in Bolton. So next slide. And I expect some of you might have come to these events. And so at these events, we had a lot of just information about the project and the process. And then we had a couple of dot exercises. For folks who have participated in dot exercises, we asked people to look at the types of things that we were talking about and considering and incorporating into, subsequent plans for the corridor, and ask them to tell us, just using dots, what things did they like, what appealed to them. And the colors don't mean anything in particular. Any colors means the same thing. It just means I like this thing that I see. And so I would say generally positive reception for the project. We did have folks who had comments about the road and fixing the road and, slowing or speeding up traffic on the road. But generally, I would say pretty positive response around just improving what happens in the corridor on either side of the road, and also improving the ability for people to walk along the road, to get across the road, and access things, adjacent to the road. So a lot of dots, a lot of stickers, and in terms of some of the things that people put the most dots on, not surprising, and fairly consistent with what we heard from the survey. A lot of support for public gathering spaces. People like those images and like that idea. Walkable areas and improvements to allow people to, again, walk along the corridor and access the corridor, and what's along it from adjacent neighborhoods. And then mixed use development. Not everybody was keen on every image, but there was quite a bit of support for kind of those mixed use development images in general. And I think we got one more slide on this one. Then we also asked people, in addition to kind of looking at those images and telling us what they liked, people use these stickers to talk about where they wanted to see specific things within the 4 different kind of focus areas or specific areas along the corridor that we'd started to map. And so the different stickers denoted things like more shopping or more eating or more parks or better pedestrian pathways. So some of the things that people that again kind of rose to the top in terms of the number of these stickers that people put on there, some similar things to what I talked about just a moment ago. I mean, better pedestrian crossing and other improvements, mixed use development, gathering places, shopping, dining, you know, again, pretty consistent. So I would say what we heard at the open houses, pretty consistent with what we heard at the survey. And again, I would say generally positive responses and people really supportive of, you know, being able to do more things within this corridor and access more places and activities, having it be a more active place. So that's what I would say about the open houses. I think we just had those couple slides on that. Yeah. So take a pause there to see if people have any questions or comments about the open houses. And then, you know, after that, we can talk about the draft vision and goals and get your feedback on all that.
I think the only reminder I'll throw out, Matt, is for the Robinwood and Bolton neighborhood meetings, we sent out invitations to every address within each of those neighborhoods. So it was nearly 3,000 invitations to each address. I'm sorry, phrase that. It was 1,230 invitations in the Robinwood Neighborhood Association and like 1,650 in the Bolton neighborhood. So we invited everyone who has an address in those neighborhoods to come out and see it.
So the turnout wasn't really that great.
It wasn't a high turnout, but you know, look, we can invite and offer people to come engage, but we can't make them engage. So we're going to continue to do that, and it does look like we're going to be able to send out invitations to every address in the city of West Lynn sometime this fall to talk about this project. So.
And I think, you know, I would just add that that's why we're also doing online surveys. That's why Chris and other folks are also out there going to community events and just going to locations along the corridor and just talking to people there, you know, so that not everybody has to come to a public meeting or an open house to talk to us. And there's always going to only be a certain number of people who say, oh, yes, I will take an hour or 2 out of my day and come to a meeting like that. So I would say, you know, again, collectively, got 140 people that come to these events. That's not terrible. I mean, it's a fraction of the number of people we sent letters to, but it's still a decent number of people. So that's kind of my take on it, at least. And it's just one of, you know, multiple tools we're using here. So.
Quick question, and I just went through all the comments and they were fascinating. The things I just want to make sure for clarification, I understand about the potholes, but the comments that kept coming up again and again, specifically about the items of sidewalks, bike lanes, traffic light at Plimlico, and flashing lights. Those seem to be the ones that repeated the most. Are those all ODOT, or is there anything that West Lynn has jurisdiction over any of those topics?
Well, ODOT owns the right of way, but they certainly wouldn't complain if we wanted to come through and put in a sidewalk for them. You know, those are really expensive, and I'm sure they would be happy to improve their space. But I think, I'm not sure how all that's going to play out at the end, but it's part of the narrative. What we're seeing, as you can see from the comments, is crosswalks and pedestrian environment is really under improved along the corridor,
which is so really interesting when I just made it through the whole 84-page document myself, and the very last slide has a few more of the demographics that were surveyed, and I want to point out that 50% were 65 or older, specifically 20%, 19% were 55 to 64. Maybe 32% were 65 to 74, and 10%, or sorry, 9% were 75 or older. So
So we're all gonna be dead by the time.
And I think.
Crosswalks get in there.
and even-
Eric Erickson.
And I think about-
Level of generativity is the highest level of actualization of
So then,
human. As you know, from Eric Erickson's studies of human development, generativity, the caring of the next generation is the highest level of human actualization.
The building, planting a tree that we will not have the shade of.
So maybe we can get Matt to move on to the next agenda item.
Yeah, we can start going over the
Draft goals.
the drafts. I think at this point, and I think that's kind of what we've all been talking about in the sphere of, so.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon, and he's going to kind of walk us through the draft project vision and goals, kind of where it came from, or what information we used to generate it, and just kind of present what we've got, and then get your comments and see if, mainly the question is, are we on the right track? Are you supportive of what you're seeing so far, or do you suggest some changes to what we've got? So I will turn it over to Brandon to talk about that.
Thanks, Matt, and great discussion so far. I'll talk about these next few slides and give Matt a break from talking for a little bit. And yeah, like Matt said, we'd love all of your feedback on what we've come up with for the first draft of the vision and the goals. And I think we provided that in the meeting packet as well. So hopefully you've had a chance before this meeting to take a look. But now's your chance to weigh in on it. But first, just a little bit of background on how we came up with this vision and goals. So it's largely based on community input to date. So that includes the online survey that we already talked about. So all the survey results from that, what we heard, the various pop-up events that Chris and Lynn have been participating in, asking similar questions, getting feedback from community members who've attended these events. Our open houses that we already talked about, a lot of the same feedback that we heard, as Matt mentioned, consistent with what we heard from the online survey as well as what we heard from you all from our first working group meeting. And then also just general feedback that we've heard to date from briefings with the City Council and Planning Commission. So the purpose of the vision and goals is really to just kind of provide a broad guiding framework for this project overall. So it'll kind of help be kind of the collective North Star, so to speak, that will kind of help orient the overall project policies and any zoning updates that come out of this, and the overall corridor master plan and comp plan policies. All of that will want to make sure the overall product and deliverables of the project are consistent with the vision and the goals. So with that, I'll just hop over to the vision. Oh, sure.
I do think we might be missing a page.
Last sentence seems to be unfinished.
Yeah, so we're actually missing a page of
Oh, the last page. Yeah.
of this one.
Okay, I'll go print that out for you right now.
Okay. Page in the meeting packet?
Yeah, just the economic development opportunities in the functional corridor and spaces.
Just the printed pages that we
Yeah.
provided as backup today. Is
Yeah,
it them in the-
Yeah, the packet materials were accurate, just what we printed for the table today.
Okay.
It's that last page, so Lynn's gonna print it off for our group here.
Okay.
So if you keep going, she'll catch up.
All right. So yeah, I'm not gonna read the whole draft project vision, but in a nutshell, it's just this quick paragraph that kind of summarizes, distills everything we've heard from the community as to what they want in the Highway 43 corridor. And I'll also note that we actually used a survey tool that kind of categorized and summarized all of the the survey results, including the written comments, into broad categories, which kind of helped us come up with this project vision and the draft goals. So it was very heavily informed by all the community comments. But I'll leave it here and let folks have a chance to read it, and feel free to weigh in on aspects you agree with, that you disagree with. So now's your chance to share your feedback.
Yeah, I don't know. For the safety and accessibility, it says comfortably roll. I don't know what roll means.
Chair.
Wheelchair.
Okay,
Learn
that's
it.
fine with me. I was thinking like
Skateboards.
some people were like just rolling along.
Rolling slime, yeah.
Like tumbleweeds.
That's what it's slang.
Yeah, it's kind of a broad term that
Whatever.
I don't see
includes any type of mobility that is not walking or biking. So wheelchairs, skateboards, scooters.
Now, Brandon, are you just wanting us to focus on the first draft vision paragraph right now?
Yes.
Okay, so what we see on screen, okay.
Can I ask about a variety of efficient transportation? Are we talking about a Lake Oswego trolley that somebody mentioned, or?
I think that's the idea with the vision is for us to incorporate those ideas when we read it. So when we read the vision, it's like, oh, well, a trolley might fit in here as a part of our vision in some way. So does that make sense?
I mean, I think vision statements are always written in a pretty broad way. They're intended to be broad. They're intended to provide sort of an overarching vision, sort of description of what you're trying to achieve in a place. And then we've got some more specific goals that Brandon will talk about in a moment. And then we'll ultimately have even a more specific plan. So vision statements are intended to be fairly broad so that they can support a variety of specific ideas or projects or design. So I would put that out there and just say, we sometimes visions get into more details, but they often are pretty broadly written. Whether or not that exactly means trolley or not, I can't say, but they are supposed to be pretty broad.
We haven't talked about it at all. I think the main source of transportation is vehicular. And
Yeah, but will that be the case in 50 years?
right.
Yeah, see, we're not planning for today or 10 years ago, we're planning for 50 years from now. And the vision needs to inform that.
Yeah.
That's what I think. The vision we don't want the vision to limit
Correct.
the thoughts and ideas. There used to be a trolley that ran all the way through, but there's a lot of houses and stuff in the way now.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Another thing I forgot to mention, can you all hear me? Oh, there we go. Is that the vision and the goals will be shared pretty broadly with the community for the remaining engagement events for the project, and it'll kind of be front and center for all project engagement, and as well as for the actual master plan and the project itself. So it'll kind of be a quick way to communicate the whole purpose and goals of the project to the public, that is.
Thank you, Brendan. Christine, I don't think you had an opportunity to introduce yourself. I see your hand is up in the panelist section.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. I apologize. I joined late. Christine Lewis, Metro Councilor. I love the direction of this draft vision. My only concern is that safety is only mentioned in the context that visitors will feel safe. And I think we actually need to be pushing ourselves towards interventions and design that don't coddle the feeling of safety that many in cars feel, even though statistically they're unsafe. And we should actually be looking towards actual safety measures. So if there's a way that we can balance the desire to feel safe in many respects, there's many kinds of safety, but also recognize that traffic violence interventions are going to need to be measured off of real safety effects.
Yeah, thanks, Counselor. That's a good comment.
So like, almost like there should be a safety sentence in there is kind of what she's saying, right? To elevate that.
Yes.
And try to elevate this.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was hoping we'd elevate was something along the lines of conservation of the existing spaces within the corridor. So I know it's hardly in the plans, but that's the idea of the vision, which is, you know, we're talking about like the Robin Wood multimodal trails. So how do we keep that conserved? So the idea is not to turn it into a 4-lane highway as the option. It's like, let's just make our own highways next to the highway. That'll be better, you know. That doesn't seem to be the fix here as much as conserving some of the community bonds and the urban, suburban feeling. So
Like you're saying, like kind of like preserving like the historical connections that already exist or something.
exactly, like, I'm thinking maybe green spaces specifically, like my mind is going to the trails along Robin. And that conservation.
Yeah, I think if you use the word conservation, kind of getting, I mean, I think that's incorporated in the other comments and the, in terms of, you know, functional corridor and spaces. But if you start using the word conserve, that's kind of, that can be, that inherently limits a vision for the future. But unless you say specifically like conserve open space, you have to define what you want to conserve.
I don't think it's saying the word trails, you know, to parks.
We don't necessarily want to conserve the 70s.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that's the case, let's just wrap it up and go home.
Isn't the right word. You want to facilitate and grow. Maybe facilitate and grow is a better for what you want to do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having some kind of reference to sustainability in here. You know, maybe in the vision, but maybe in
Sustainability,
one of
big
the other
idea,
things.
yes.
Because I think as we do other things in the city, we try to kind of connect with that sustainability component. And so there could be something in here that talks about and that could be just the multimodal transportation. It could be increasing the pedestrian access. That's all sustainable, more sustainable than creating greater access for cars.
So I think there's two things there. How should we be getting feedback? Is that?
Well, I know that Brandon is diligently taking notes right now, as well as this is being recorded for future reference.
Okay.
I think this is exactly what you want, right, Matt, Brandon? We're looking for discussion and feedback on this draft vision.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, what I've heard is incorporating sustainability somewhere in this vision statement, and also thinking about what aspects of the area we might want to conserve, whether they're some of the existing open spaces or existing connections that are helping achieve the vision that we've described. I kind of heard some suggestions to incorporate some of that. So yeah, this is definitely the kind of feedback we're looking for. So I think and as you said, Brandon's definitely diligently taking notes. So yeah, I guess I would just say, yeah, anything else people think is kind of missing from this vision, or if there's anything that they're seeing that, and I also heard safety, not just feel safe, but be safe, you know, in the corridor, you know, promote designs that actually improve safety, not just sort of the feeling of being safe. So that's another thing I heard. So anyway, yeah, I just ask anything else missing or anything else you see that you think doesn't sync up with, you know, what you think the vision ought to be for the area.
I'll add that the draft project goals kind of expand on the vision statement as well. So the vision statement is just the very broad kind of introductory statement as to what this project is all about, and then the goals get a little bit further. So there are things that you want a little bit more, you know, specific or targeted. It could be more appropriate for the goals potentially. But yeah, right now we're just getting some feedback on this high level vision statement.
I think if we just reword the safe and comfortable to have safety and comfort. If we just change that sentence, I think that kind of hits it for me. I don't know if that's the same for you, Christine. So the sentence right now says all community members and visitors will feel safe and comfortable. And I think if we, and yeah, so if we change it to all community members and visitors will have safety and comfort.
Or just are safe and comfortable. I think we can definitely, like, if we know what the intent is, we can come back to you with some suggested language. I never try to like do too much wordsmithing during the meeting.
I don't think we need to add a sentence for that as what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
They'll
agree.
take these comments and rework the whole thing and come out with something, so.
But I do think we could use a sentence about sustainability, which is kind of what I was getting at about the conservation, yeah, having something more sustainable in practice. I do think that would be good within this draft vision.
And I appreciate that, given the infill movement that's happening in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Which is impinging on a trailhead.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say then, in terms of incorporating that part of the vision's purpose is to like integrate the connections so that people can use efficient ways to move about the neighborhood, or sustainable ways to move about the corridor or something like that?
That idea,
What you're getting?
like that idea should be encapsulated within the
Okay.
sentence somehow. So yes, I'm saying that, but I'm not saying that specifically.
Yeah.
Saying it, but I'm not saying it.
I think they got that feedback.
Well, I'm kind of confused because sustainability means something to me, but what you guys are saying doesn't really, I mean, I don't really understand what you mean by sustainability in terms of this vision.
That's why it is the most beautiful marketing term outside of green when it first appeared.
Because it can mean like whatever you want it to mean.
So
Yeah, so, but if it means whatever you want it to mean, it's meaningless.
If it could mean climate
It's
friendly.
meaningless, it's a meaningless, I mean, you have a concrete idea, so what is this concrete idea that you want in sustainability to represent?
Right.
For this vision plan of a land use and placemaking and pedestrian connections.
Well, and I guess to me, it means ensuring those pedestrian connections so that people can choose to walk or bike somewhere rather than get in their cars.
Okay, and that the current language isn't sufficient, that you feel it needs to actually be called out as sustainability.
I think that could be part of one of the goals, like integrated spaces and design. I think that paragraph.
Yeah, again, probably don't want to narrow the vision too much, and so the goals could be better listed with that.
I do think there is a climate friendly piece that should be in the top of this.
Yeah.
This is our world.
That's what sustainability.
So, and I think that's what we're getting
That's what
at
we're getting at,
partly.
yes.
And so we're dealing with a world that's gonna be 50 years, like we're really fighting this battle. If we're doing that, it ought to be in the first part of the vision. That, you know, whatever, if it's that we're gonna try to, whatever we can to make this place that is climate friendly.
Okay, yeah, that's more specific.
Yeah, more
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah.
So we're not gonna put, you know, highway connecting Old River through Nixon to Mary S. Young and, you know, extend, like, see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, that's just a red herring, because no one's proposing that, so, but what we're talking about is like, you know, the trails along the highway to improve it for pedestrian and bikes and other modes of more sustainable transportation options. Maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
And maybe there's electric car charging stations in the middle of the corridor, like,
Right.
that's all fits in there.
Well,
And
and you
bigger.
do know that there's a separate CFEC, Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities initiative that the city's taking that applies to the whole city, you know, and that's another thing. It's that's another overlay to this. So it doesn't necessarily, this doesn't have to represent that.
Okay.
It's an existing effort, but
Okay, thank you.
So I've been wrestling and grappling with how to frame this or think about this. And if you'll give me just 20 seconds to just walk with me on this. One of the people who don't live in Westland, throughout the Willamette Valley, they don't think about Westland. Westland really doesn't exist. Westland is the place that maybe they took their children to a soccer game or something. Beyond that, not so much. Outside of it, just it's not part of their experience within the Willamette Valley in general, unless they have to drive through 43. Most people, if they have to drive through Westland, they don't drive through Old Westland. Old Westland is rarely a destination, and mostly their experience through Westland is merely driving through 43 to get to 205 or to bypass traffic. When 205 gets built up, they're using this as an alternative route. 43 has become an arterial form of transportation, but with nothing necessarily distinguishable in terms of endpoints that along 43, much like Foster used to be in Southeast, there was nothing really to stop, for reasons to stop. Weirdly, several years ago, when Foster got marijuana dispensaries, tattoo parlors, and strip joints, those were all three improvements. Normally, those would all be considered detriments to a community, but for Foster, at that point in time, all three became improvements that improved the neighborhoods and made it so they became destination endpoints. Because up until that point, the endpoints on Foster were linoleum, gun store, and toilet plumbing. So I'm sorry, I excluded the taxidermy. So up until then, one of the issues with Westland is Westland doesn't really have an identity outside of that's where people move so their kids can go to school.
Yeah.
So one of the things, and again, I apologize, thank you for walking with me on this. So as we've been looking at this Vision 43 and that 43 is where the majority of people's interaction where Westland will happen, this is kind of the place for the branding of where Westland's identity can actually be used to make this an endpoint destination. This, more than Old Westland, is the place to put all the aspects for income generation, to make this an endpoint, to make this. And there are a bunch of ideas that we could implement to make these kind of endpoints and also incorporate all these elements. But I don't know if, and there's a lot of ideas that came from the tour, the last meetings we've had, listening to everybody that I've just been scribbling down, but I don't know where the best place to insert or offer or even kind of suggest those are outside of just going onto the website and writing them. Or is that something that we even put in a goal that talking about Westland doesn't, Lake Oswego, its name is its identity. Lake Oswego's identity is centered around its lake. Everyone's question is West Lynn, where's Lynn? Et cetera. What is West Lynn? This is the place to put, this the place to put the identity? Is this the opportunity?
Needs pool under the waterfall.
See?
So, the falls are our identity.
And that
for us.
Well,
So
that ties into one of the many catchphrases we can use. But is this the opportunity to put into this element of the process? That part of it is that 43 is kind of one of the areas to where we need to kind of really cement, introduce, and showcase whatever we as a committee or as the community besides Westland's identity is, or is that too large of a scope for within this project? Because this kind of seems like a really good segue. This is the primary exposure point. If this is a possible largest point of finance, a good point of fiscal increase for the city, is this a good point to kind of bring those, dovetail those together, or is it just too big, too outside?
So I will just briefly note that the last sentence gets a little at maybe what you're talking about, but not in a super specific way. I don't know that we can do everything you're describing in this vision statement. We might be able to do a little more of it in some of the goals. But I will say, if you read that last sentence, it does talk about a corridor that embodies the spirit and essence of our community. So I think that's a little bit what you're getting at. But beyond that, it doesn't have all the things that you've been writing down. So anyway, something to think about. I don't know that we have an answer to that question or a multi-pronged question you just asked.
I do think having the waterfront development in my mind while working on the vision and coming back to the vision would be helpful. And that does incorporate some of the falls work within the scope. So if it's set within our community, that embodies the spirit of something about the waterfront
Or even something at the second to last or third to last word, endpoint destination.
Yeah, and I know we're trying to wordsmith, but we're trying but this is, I think, is a good experiment to just get our thoughts into a concrete example, because they are somewhat abstract at this point still.
Well, in Westland,
second meeting.
in the Oregon Falls was literally the gateway to the entire Pacific Northwest. We've got material. There are huge opportunities. If you want to look for identity, we've got tons.
So I do want to note that separately, the city council has commissioned planning department or community development department to start a wayfaring and branding, which is what you're kind of getting at. And that's a separate project, and that's for the entire city. So that would incorporate, the waterfront and the Vision 43 would infuse that document. So I do want to keep us on track of what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to do the alpha and omega here. We're trying to do Vision 43 and what we want the corridor, the 3-mile corridor, to look like in 50 years. So, I mean, I don't think we need to wordsmith. I just think we need to give him our feedback on that. And I know he needs feedback on all of this. So why don't we let him kind of move on and just kind of keep it, maybe step back at the general level and just give him general stuff. And so he can go back and rework, because he's going to bring all this back. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So I definitely do think we need to get the goals. I would, if you would be interested in maybe emailing your list of ideas or words, I would like to look at it myself. So I don't know if you email them to.
Yeah,
Chris,
we can spread them to everyone.
Does anyone have any ideas about the vision that they want to bring up in particular? Or
I think we'll be able to get to the next one and they'll have good feedback for us next time.
Okay. All right. So the next goal, so you have them up there now. So
Yep,
and we have 5 for the sheets now.
It was on the back.
Mine wasn't on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them cut off some. Okay. We got it.
I believe in your packets, you should have the complete document. Now, I'm not sure if that was what was missing before, but
Yeah,
okay.
So we're
Yes.
looking at the accessibility now.
Yes, yeah. So again, project goals just kind of expands upon the vision and is a little bit more direct and concrete. And you'll probably notice in the packets that the actual goals have a little kind of descriptions accompanied with them. We didn't include that on the slide because that just would have been way too much text. But feel free to weigh in on whether we got the overall goal right, if you agree with them, disagree, kind of same exercise as what we did with the vision, and feel free to also weigh in on our descriptions to those goals as well. So sounds like sustainability was a theme that came up for the vision statement that wasn't really explicitly addressed in the statement. Maybe that's something we could consider here in the goals to make it more explicit. It's kind of touched upon a little bit or implied in some of these goals, but we could potentially add it as its own separate goal or include it more in the goal statements.
I think in the safety and accessibility, I go back to what Christine said about really making it much less kind of fuzzy, like words like comfort or encouraging development patterns to give people options. Like it seems like there ought to be like required development patterns that give people a variety of safe options to move. So stuff like stronger language around safety and accessibility.
I had just one change to the first sentence that says prioritize a comfortable and accessible environment for people to safely walk, bike, and roll, which kind of emphasizes the safety, because safety is a given.
Great.
And I think that kind of says, you know.
And if we could even categorize walk, bike, and roll, I don't like calling those out specifically myself. It's not commute, but whatever that might be. Whose camera is on their left now? We should let them know. Okay.
There's a cell down.
Okay. There we go. I wanted to let you know your camera was not in the best of places for you. Okay. But yeah, I agree with those changes.
With what you were saying about encourage development comments, I hear what you're saying about the softness of the language, but do we have an ability for an enforcement mechanism to actually regulate, to make it so that those can be regulated for those development patterns to be put in place?
Yeah, part of that would come from the development code that MIG will write for us. The other part will be something we'll talk about later, which will be design standards, what we require of development when they come through and do development. One way like Oswego has captured sort of that successful space in the wiser blocks is they have very stringent design standards. So if you want to develop, you will do it like this.
So we will be
within reason, yes, within reason.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, there's going to be a balance between what you require if you actually want something to be developed. I mean, if you make it essentially financially impossible, then you won't get anything. So there's a balance, and that's also where discussions about height and bulk of buildings comes into play. You want parking to be maybe buried in parking garages beneath, well, you need to offer developers something in height so they can get their money back, so to speak. So there's a balance there, but that's where that would come into play. It was a very long-winded answer, sorry.
I think I kept long-winded well.
I think encourage.
It's not a competition, David.
On integrated spaces and design, third line from the bottom, leverage proximity to existing community access, such as parks. I would add trails to that list.
Or again, I mean, I think the trails are part of the park system, right?
No, they connect some cul-de-sacs as well.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
Like rights of way.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, they are,
Pedestrian.
but you call them out separately because they're a different function. They move people versus, people gather.
Yeah,
So-
we have things
so
like
it's appropriate.
trail and pedestrian master plan. We also have a parks master plan. They're separate, managed by the same group, but they're separate things.
Okay.
So also a lot of trails aren't necessarily considered park or open space. So that kind of makes them a different entity in how we manage them. We can't sell a park or any real estate that's a park or open space without a vote of the entire community. Trails aren't always considered a park or an open space. Sometimes they're just trails across property we have. So it's different. We don't need to get too deep into it, but yeah, it's a good call out because we really want to find and enhance those pedestrian connections between the neighborhoods along the corridor. So we don't always have to go up to the highway to go from one point to the next. As I always look to Councilor Bright on this one, our master of walking through the neighborhoods along the corridor without having to get up to the highway.
Yes.
We really want to enhance those connection points, as well as at some point, I think, go back and do some wayfinding, some signage and some locational type
And I
things.
think that any kind of signage that would say, hey, this way to Cedar Oak.
Yeah, half mile to the library this way. Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of a part of the project is to find those and see those connections. And then I hope to be able to go back at some point in the future and talk about, you know, reprioritizing where those are in our pedestrian and trail master plan, as well as in the transportation system plan, and then also the wayfinding and the signage. So it's a part of the project for sure.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of cul-de-sacs that say no outlet, but there's actually.
But they're that's,
pedestrian
yeah,
outlet,
Yeah.
But it's not marked.
yes, that's right. Or it's been sort of encroached upon, I was gonna say taken, encroached upon by the local residents and have either in some cases gated them so they look very private, or just let hedges overgrow so you physically can't do it. And I think that, you know, in the future will be a nice priority for the city to take on. So.
So we are 4 minutes over to the corridor concept examples. I would like to still go over a few of these goals, so I just want to take a pause to look where we're at and ask who's leading that discussion. Matt, Brandon, are you?
Yes.
Do you want to talk about those examples specifically?
So I'm going to jump in real quick. I mean, we're going to show you some examples, and they're really just examples of things we've done in other communities. And they're going to sort of there to show you the types of illustrations that we're ultimately going to prepare for specific locations in the corridor. We don't need a ton of feedback on them, just like, how do those look? Do you like the way those look? Do you like the style? Do you like the sort of types of views we're showing?
Can we maybe do some of that feedback asynchronously and give that back to you?
I would suggest we finish up this discussion on the goals, and then hopefully we have at least enough time to quickly show you those examples and just get some quick feedback, and then we can talk about next steps.
I think we're at perfect alignment there. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. No problem.
So to go back to the document and the spaces of design, there's the potential connectivity to the waterfront. It is connected to the waterfront, at least through the Abernethy Bridge. If I remember the zoning that we're looking at, like it does go up to the waterfront. So I know it's talking about probably the waterfront development, the same way that we were just discussing it, but it's not potential.
Well, and I think our corridor is from 205 to the city limits. Harbor.
So it's up
And
there.
so, but the connectivity to the waterfront is kind of on the other side of 205.
And I think we're talking about pedestrian or bike access.
Which is through Abernethy. So that has direct access. So
No,
there's no
he's,
potential.
yeah, we're talking about adding potential connections here, you know, here along the corridor, like how can we get down
Yeah.
to this part
And
in the
so,
corridor, and what potential connections can we get to?
so
That's
if
what-
you stay up there real quick, or you are right, go up there and point at it, but if you go to
That's
Abernethy.
why no one online can see what you guys are talking
Oh,
about
sorry,
right now.
yes.
So you've now made this
Yeah.
discussion on.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. But at the Abernethy Bridge, the trail, the waterfront trail goes through there as well as through Maddox and Burnside. And I do believe that is incorporated in the general layout of the area that we mapped out. So do I have the map available? If I look at the map.
Or you could just, if that's the case, you just change potential to improved.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So it's not
Okay.
potential because it is connected.
If
So
that's what yeah.
get at.
Yeah,
I
that
can-
works.
But there could be other places
Yeah.
north of that.
Yes,
Is a-
exactly.
So
Yeah.
I maybe enhance,
Yeah, enhance, improve.
but
something.
again, now we're getting back into words.
Well, but I think this is an important one to call out because it's not potential because it does exist. Like it's not saying this is something that we need to strive for as much as it's already there. And then, walking and biking again in that same sentence, if we can encapsulate that somehow.
I don't know, I'm fine with. I
You're
really
fine with
like
walking
walking,
and biking
biking.
specifically?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I want to have a discussion is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So we can, if you're fine with that, then we can leave that as is. So does anyone have any other, for the spaces and designs call out specifically? In that section, that goal?
So again, we're not so much wordsmithing as just, giving your, kind of your opinion about whether or not that
It captures.
captures the thoughts and feelings of.
And yeah, and I didn't think potential captured the thought. I don't mean to. I have to call it out as I read it though. I mean, it's the,
So are there any comments on community gathering spaces? Anything missing, anything that maybe gives the wrong feeling? Or the right feeling?
and then multifunctional, going back to like a multi-use, mixed use.
What section are you?
Community gathering, the third goal. So this is the one that goes over to the next page, everyone else thinks.
I think multifunctional is very
Yeah.
descriptive. We don't have, that is something that will be defined as we propose zoning changes or whatever, but I think that's descriptive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just trying to say serves many functions instead of simply it's a road to pass through West Lynn. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing we're getting at there, or trying to get at.
So it does come up in economic development opportunities, so that's interesting. I like that though.
I think in the functional corridors and spaces in that last sentence, that's where you could also include something about the climate friendly or sustainability or something.
Well, do you think we should have an extra thing, an extra thing like sustainability
Like
and
its own
climate
section.
friendly? And then develop like a little paragraph, or do you think it should be just included?
Like
I
its
think it'll
own
be
section.
integrated.
Yeah,
It should be integrated.
Yeah. I don't think it needs to be a separate bullet, separate goal. It's part of every goal, really.
Yeah, I think we can definitely look for opportunities to kind of weave that language throughout each of these goal statements.
I think that would be great, yeah, because it does fit in spaces and design, of course. So, thanks.
is anything missing, like any bullet points that you draft goals?
The only thing that's missing for me is that we possibly move away from separate strip malls into something that resembles more like Lower Bloomsbury, which is I think somebody used the word like that. Consistent or connected, flow, because it is this strip mall, and then a mile of lovely open space in the park to another strip mall, and then a third strip mall.
And I think that's addressed in the economic development, is this integration of commercial, residential, and recreational spaces. So that is kind of talking about how do you get from one to the other, so that you don't have to, park your car here and do this and then drive it down the street and do this as those areas are integrated more, whether it's a trail or, whatever to allow you to move from one to the other.
But you want the commercial spaces to be integrated and connected.
Which may happen when we rebrand and everybody's got similar signage, or I don't know what that's.
But you
gonna look
want a
like.
cohesive feeling.
So we talked about this early on with Matt and Brandon and the MIG team, and I think Matt, or it could have been Brandon's comment was really, I think, well placed, is that if we rezone the entire corridor, you're gonna dilute the product, right? So focusing on those strip mall areas as nodes where you want to enhance that commercial and residential. And then in between, you're probably, generally speaking, leaving it alone, which is tough because we have a 110-acre park in the middle of all this, Mary S. Young. We can't change that. You know, so you're gonna have these sort of distances between some of these nodes, but making those nodes better, making them a more diverse options.
And connected in the node.
Well, yeah, connected within the node, but also then that's where some of that pedestrian connection comes in between those nodes too. So I totally get what you're saying. And that was my initial thought on this. Oh, we can do, you know, if the community wants to, we'll do all this. And I think Matt or Brandon really said it. You don't want to dilute the products. You get a little bit here, then a little bit, you know, 2 miles down the road. We really want to focus on certain areas to enhance those.
Plus, we don't have eminent domain over all those houses.
No, in fact, none of this has to change. Any of the zoning changes that we make are not required to change today. It's more if you go to do something new in the future, you can do these things now.
Which is why we're talking 50 years.
That's right, because maybe people can continue to use the space exactly as it is as long as they want to.
It's an incentive.
It's an incentive, and it's a space a developer might see and say, you know, we could do something with that old McDonald's site. Now that we can do something different, it becomes a more, what's the word I'm looking, there's better opportunities, there's more opportunity for them to do.
So if there are ways we could, based on what you're saying, seeing some of those notes, using the example of, for example, Mary S. Young, not using it as a benefit, not an obstacle, connecting it to the Hidden Spring shopping areas, kind of like the Weiser buildings, connecting it to a larger walking space.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've consistently heard so far is that people want access points to get to places like Mary S. Or we have some nice trails on the west side of 43 across from Mary S., but they don't marry up for that. I mean, that was terrible, wasn't it? Sorry, but they don't connect. We don't have a crosswalk there. We don't have, so I think we're looking to highlight those kinds of things. And yeah, let's utilize what we have as assets and benefits, not as hurdles to something, right? So yeah, I think that's Mary, it's a good comment. And I think it took me a while to kind of figure this out, but MIG's done this more than once.
But within the focus area, you know, within that area, you want one strip mall and another strip mall to be connected, pedestrian access ways, and maybe some design standards or something that creates a look and a feel of, you know, that they're not separate little, you know, each.
Yeah, and moving away from strip malls into more dynamic spaces, you know,
And like you said, when we were on the tour, when you're at, say, Walmart, and you want to get to the other side of 43, you've got to walk all the way down
Springs,
go down Hidden Springs to cross the street, or then go down 43 to cross the street. And it's not inviting, it's not nice, and we can make that much better.
these are really relics of a bygone auto-centric era. These developments are 40 years old.
Because you don't want to walk down that driveway that enters there because there's no sidewalk that goes into the parking lot.
Right.
And so somebody swinging off of 43 wouldn't know you were there. So.
Yeah, so I'm going to maybe try to summarize partly what I'm hearing, which is that we want to enhance connections for people within each of the sort of focus areas or the mixed use areas we're looking at. We want to also make sure people can get between those different areas and can connect to other destinations outside of them all along the corridor. But we're not talking about kind of totally transforming the land uses all along the corridor. That is why we've kind of focused on some specific areas because it's a 3.5 mile long corridor. And as Chris said, which was what we said earlier, we're trying not to dilute the energy too much. And that's why we've sort of emphasized what happens in some specific locations along the corridor, but we are trying to enhance the corridor overall as well in terms of connectivity and connections and access. So that's how I would sort of say it. And if these goals aren't saying that quite clearly enough, I think we can look for ways to make them, to bring that out a little more strongly. Did that capture at least somewhat I've been hearing? And I'm trying to summarize because
I just, I think, I've heard this word nodes a lot and also we talk about focus areas. Is there, should we be explicitly pointing that out in our vision? Because it's not in our vision.
Probably yes. And again, this is, yeah, we probably should be. I will also say this is not the first time we're going to look at this. And we got a lot more steps to go. But I mean, yeah, if that's not clear, we probably should point it out a little more.
I think it would help people to also wrap their heads
Sure.
around.
Okay. And we got about 11 minutes left here.
Yep.
I would love to be able to show you some of these graphics that we've got and just get a quick take on those before we finish up here. Would that be okay to move on to that? Okay, awesome.
So I can quickly cover these examples of visualizations and concepts. So these focus areas are probably familiar. We shared this at the last meeting and have shared them at the other engagement events. So the initial kind of examples and ideas we've come up with for concepts and visualizations are focused specifically on the context of these specific focus areas. So this is the focus area that's kind of in the northwestern area of the corridor with the Walmart and the vacant McDonald's. And then the other focus area is where the old fire station is. That one was particularly interesting and an area where we honed in on because the city owns that property. So there's a lot more potential and opportunities with that one. So there's, yeah, again, just more variety of options with that one. So in terms of the timeline for this task of the project, we're looking at starting visualizations here pretty soon and gonna complete them either later this summer and probably later into early or mid fall. And again, these visualizations will kind of help inform the comp plan and zoning concepts as well. And also they'll be used kind of throughout the project, kind of as a branding tool and to help show the public what we're talking about with this whole vision project. So jump to a couple of the examples. So as Matt had mentioned, these are projects that we've worked on before in other communities. So this one here is another corridor plan that we worked on in Boise, Idaho. So for one of these concepts, we kind of did a before and after kind of exercise here with the imagery, Google Earth imagery, I believe, and just how it could be transformed into something that's more walkable and pedestrian friendly, bike friendly, more mixed use development. And that's also kind of what we're showing here on the image here on the right. Has more green space, you know, a lot of the things and concepts that we've kind of been discussing here today and what we've heard from the community.
What's the blue roofing?
So
I think those are solar panels.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I can share the other example here that we have. So this is a little closer to home. This is in Wilsonville, the Wilsonville Town Center, which was a master plan that was completed fairly recently in the last few years, I believe. Similar idea to Boise, you know, mixed use, walkable, a lot of community gathering spaces, more green spaces. So these are just kind of the general direction that we're starting to envision for our corridor concepts and visualizations. So just get some quick thoughts and feedback as to whether this is the direction the Vision 43 concept should go in, if people like these. Yeah, just quick reactions. I can flip back and forth.
Well, I do think if people saw the Wilsonville one, they would go, well, now my commute's gonna be that much longer. So that's one of the challenges with this whole project is like, that looks like a downtown, which I love. But then you have a lot of people very focused on driving through.
Yeah.
And I do want to be clear that we're not proposing to show these to people. What we're proposing to do is create images like this that show design concepts for the focus areas that Brandon showed on the previous slide. And whether or not this is the right scale, we're not really kind of saying, oh, this is the right height of buildings or the right mix. It's more just like, this is the kind of visual, the type of visuals we would propose to use to illustrate what could happen in the future long term on the corridor. And I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of, yeah, some people are going to say, wow, that's way too much here. I think as we've talked about sort of scale, we've talked about, more like 3 stories, not 5 or 6 stories of buildings. So I do want to just note that and say, well, tell us what you like about these, but don't assume that the stuff we do for you is going to look just like this in terms of the scale and the mass and the height.
Got it, thanks.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I was just gonna say, I think this is kind of, it's my opinion, this is the direction we want to go. We want to get some kind of visualization.
Yes.
That people can react or respond to.
Yeah, all along the plan has been to get, 3, 4, 5-ish months into the feedback phase where we're out in the community, and then take that and basically render what people are telling us they want onto visuals of 43, so we can start getting, it's the next iteration, right? It's the next step, because it's easy to talk about things in theory, and then you get a visual of it, you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not what I meant, or that is what I meant. So I think we're now getting into this moment, so.
So you can even ask them like, or you can show them, here's what it looks like with 2-story buildings and 5-story buildings.
Correct.
It's sort of.
And that's exactly right.
Setbacks and all this other things.
And one of the things that Lynn and Matt and Brandon and I met about a couple weeks ago is even things like the angle and the distance from something like sort of that 45-degree angle scaled out, or do we like it closer in on the street? I mean, they can do all of it, but it all costs money as well. So we want to be effective with our visualizations and give people an honest representation of what we think they're asking us. And then yes, we will start doing, of these 3 options, which is your favorite? And we'll start seeing which bubble up. Is it single story the way it is, which we probably won't offer as an option because we already have that.
Yeah.
But is it 2 or 3 or 4 stories, or how much of the lot can you cover? So that's kind of the direction we're headed based on the feedback we have now.
Thanks.
If you can just put a brew pub into McDonald's.
I think we know the way to Mary's heart right now.
You're done. That's it.
That's right. Play drinks. That's like, just take out the play plates, you put the growlers right there.
So one of the things I like about this rendering is I like seeing it kind of, it's not quite that 45-degree
Yeah, it's a
angle,
little
but
closer.
it's a little closer. And so, yeah, I do agree about, people will say, oh my gosh, but I do think that shows how the space will feel greener and more comfortable. And then I like this one down the corner that shows the pedestrian view, because that in the end really is what matters. Right? We don't care what it looks like from the sky, but except for it gives an overall view. So I don't think the map up there in the corner, it provides any information. I don't think that.
Depends on how big it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it were a poster at an open house, I think that you could get up close to it and look at it a little bit. In this format, maybe not great, but I agree, much like going to the Weiser blocks on a tour, you can see that at the pedestrian scale, you'll still see the sky. We're not talking about downtown Manhattan. We're talking about 2, 3, 4 stories where you still feel the environment around you. So I think there's value in showing that view as well. That's my opinion.
So I think just bringing up Rosemont. So I have to drive up through Rosemont to really get here, and even just that experience, with just the few trees on the side and the pathways. I mean, that means so much to me.
Yeah.
The same thing as Main Street. right? I mean, like having those examples in my head locally.
Yep.
Are really well done jobs from the city.
Main Street's a good example, right? It's right now it's 2 stories and
Yep.
it's very open and very walkable and it's nice. Sidewalk cafes and I think it ended up a great project.
Yeah.
So sorry, I'm going on.
So Matt, your direct ask for feedback, what's your question that people can answer right now?
In 2 minutes.
Yeah, and then maybe one, because I do have a 3:00 meeting I have to get to.
In 1 minute.
Really just like, are these types of images, do you think they're going to be helpful for us to convey information to people? And are there any specific images where you think, oh, that type of image I think is particularly valuable? So I think you've been giving us some of that, but if there's any other comments along those lines, that's mostly what we're looking for.
And just do like a 5-second feedback to Matt.
Yeah, and it probably needs to be 5 to 10 and not 45 per person. So just-
5-second feedback on which you prefer.
For me, I mean, I like the human scale, but I also need some familiar landmarks, like here, Walmart's gonna be on the right.
Right.
And so that I can anchor it to what is currently in place.
Okay. It's good feedback.
That's it.
This whole slide is a better way to understand what it could look like.
Okay.
Including the big map there of the layout.
Sure. Okay.
Leah?
Yeah, I like the sidewalk view. I don't know, I'm more of a map person, but from this point, I can't really read the map,
Okay.
but hopefully one could in some other format.
You had a magnifying glass.
Lynn's point of the top right map is valid. One that keeps resonating with the person view, buildings demonstrating over 5 levels is going to be off-putting to the Westland culture. It's good. It also kind of evokes certain positive elements of the South waterfront development as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that the map and the combination of two is important to have map and the pedestrian view.
And I think this is great. I think people are not going to be able to just look at it and say, what are the opportunities? They're going to need creative visualization. And I think we've got a lot of data to generate those.
Agreed.
I would like to see something a little bit more to home personally. So I look at these and I'm having a hard time believing that's what it's gonna look like. And I know that's exactly. So, I mean, like having some examples of things, actual pictures. So actual, not just renderings, but something like a picture of the spot.
And that can be another thing that we provide as a supplement, but we are planning on doing some visualizations like this. It's not the only thing we're going to provide. I am going to have to jump off and let
thank you,
Brandon finish this up, so I'm not too late for the other meeting, which I am supposed to start and facilitate. So
you go do your thing. I'll speak to you tomorrow, or we'll speak to you
awesome.
tomorrow.
Thank you. Sorry about that, folks.
See you, Matt.
Bye.
And what about Bo? Does he have any comment online? Okay. All right. So Brandon, do you want to take us home with next steps?
Yeah, sure. Thanks everybody for your quick reactions. So just quickly walking through the next steps, we will go ahead and revise and finalize the vision and goals just based on everything we heard from you all today. So that'll happen here in the next month or so. We have a draft of survey number 2 questions put together, and I believe we'll be launching that, or the city will be launching that on their online survey platform. And this survey will be kind of building on the previous survey and have a little bit more specific questions, getting more direct feedback on types of development. Then after those 2 steps, we'll actually start putting together drafts of corridor alternatives and concepts, all based on community input and what we've heard from you all. And then beyond that, we'll be putting together the actual master plan and drafting zoning updates and adopt the corridor plan. And that will be further on into winter and spring of 2025. So kind of marrying that up to the working group meetings, just as a reminder, this whole project has 5 total working group meetings. Today is the second meeting, so we'll have 3 more, and each of these meetings will kind of line up with major project milestones or when we'll need feedback on specific deliverables. So yeah, any questions on next steps or final comments?
I have a daughter due in November. So the December.
Can she wait just a little
I don't
bit?
think so.
So, yeah, congrats. So there is a chance that we might nudge meeting 3 to like later October, early November, because I don't want to get too deep into the holidays. Because everyone just starts shutting down. I mean, we all do, like, you got family and holidays and babies. So I'm, you know, Brandon and Matt and Lynn and I will talk about maybe nudging that just a little bit forward. So hopefully we can avoid an early holiday gift for you and your family. Yeah. And then, I won't go to February just because we got to get through the holidays just.
The holidays.
I always have such high aspirations and then the holidays happen. And nothing happens.
I know, you get so productive and it just gets you.
Hey, Chris, can you
Totally.
send out that 2016?
Yes,
plans
thank
to
you.
everybody?
Yes, sir. I actually think I already made a note of that, but yes, I will.
Yeah, okay.
It's a big document, so I'll send you a link to our website.
Webpage.
It is, but we'll,
I just want to make sure, I'm sure I've got
Brandon, do you
it. I
have
just
the
want to make sure I've got what
yeah,
you're saying. And that's,
Yeah.
I know it's big, it's 43 pages.
yeah, it's a big one. Okay, so we,
Brendan, do you need anything else?
I don't think so. It's all good feedback. We can kind of target that meeting 3 for late October to avoid busy holiday season. And yeah, so good
excellent.
discussion on everybody. Good seeing y'all.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon, and thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Get the visualizations going. It's gonna be fun.
Cool.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Bye.